Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vision IS. Today, I'm going to discuss the news discussion for 19th June. So let us start with the major news items that we are going to cover first. So the first news is about the MOU between Iran and United States has come into effect. The second news is about Prime Minister has asked states to come up with district domestic product estimates. The third news is on Children's Climate Risk Report 2026 released by UNICEF. Fourth news is on women representation in political process in India. And in the fifth news, we'll be covering the smart warehousing system for food grain storage launched recently. Then we also have a couple of quick updates. So let us start from the very first news, that is about the 14-point memorandum of agreement or understanding between Iran and US. And the purpose of this agreement is to end the 100-day war that started on February 28. Okay, so this has, and there are a couple of interesting things to note here. We'll talk about the key features of the agreement as well. But interestingly, this deal was signed virtually, which means that both the leaders, the Iranian president and President Trump, were not facing, they were not literally there. They're not physically present, but they signed the deal virtually. So that was first thing. The second thing is that it is also highly symbolic because of the place or the location in which President Trump signed this agreement. And that location was Palace of Versailles, where the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919 to end the First World War. Okay, so once it was signed between Germany and the Allied powers after the First World War. So this is the significance of this particular MOU. Now let us understand what exactly are the major components of this. But before that, we should understand there were three major reasons why US and Israel launched an attack on Iran, right? So there are three major reasons. One of the reasons was regime change, because the Iranian regime was looked upon with threat and also as a source of anxiety for the Israeli and also for these Saudi or for the Gulf Arabs as well, right? So first objective was regime change, and the idea was to bring a favorable a person who would be supporting the US or the Israeli cause. And the second objective was to dismantle the Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile facility. And the third important reason why the war was launched was essentially because of the fact that there was a lot of operational realities, because there was internal turmoil in Iran, and it was basically Trump's understanding that if they launch this attack, then definitely there is going to be a lot of support from within, and therefore they will be easily able to dismantle the Iranian regime, just like what US did during Venezuela, right? So these were the major reasons why the war was fought, but because of the resilience shown by the Iranian side and because of other factors such as weaponization of Strait of Hormuz, there was a lot of pressure on President Donald Trump, even from his own constituency, to conclude or to end the war. So let us take a look into what exactly have been the major agreements, the key highlights. So essentially there are 14 major points, but we can understand this under certain heads. So majorly what we can understand is first with respect to security. The second is with respect to the maritime security or the maritime access. And the third one could be the nuclear issue, right? And fourthly, the modalities in terms of the 60-day framework that they are going to discuss the other aspects of the ceasefire. So presently, at the very short thing, what has been done is that there's going to be a permanent ceasefire, which basically means, and that there is going to be immediate and lasting end to all the military operation. So which means that this is going to be including across all the fronts, and interestingly, it will also be covering Lebanon, right? So as of now or before that, Israel has been launching a lot of attack on the southern Lebanon, particularly targeting the the Hezbollahs, okay? So this is going to be targeting, like it is also going to cover Lebanon as well. So we can see here that it is very inclusive in nature, and it also includes Israel as well, even though Israel is not a direct party of the negotiation. The second important thing is that there is going to be respect for internal affairs, which basically means that now US will no longer try to go for regime change. So they will be respecting each other's territorial sovereignty and integrity, and they will not be interfering in the internal affairs of each others. Now, these are the security centric measures. Then second one, or the second set of thing, would be about maritime domain. So here the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened. So Iran will facilitate free and safe commercial navigation through the strait. And this essentially means that whatever mines that the Iranian regime had provided or put under that area, that will be also taken away, right? Then the blockade will be ended from the US side. US will gradually lift its naval blockade and restrictions on Iranian ports within 30 days. So this is not going to be an immediate thing. This will take around 30 days. Apart from that, there are also initiative for reconstruction, right? So here, because of the damage that Iran has suffered because of the operation conducted by US and Israel on Iran, it is going to be getting a economic development reconstruction framework, a minimum of $300 billion. Now, this figure can be potentially controversial because as of now, US has said that this amount will not directly come from US only, but it will be coming from the other countries in the West Asia, right? Then there is going to be sanctions relief. So again, this is a very welcome move because many of Iranian funds have been frozen by the US administration. So under this, US has committed to ending the economic sanctions, including those included in UN Security Council resolutions under a mutually agreed timeline. And it will also lead to release of frozen assets. In fact, around $12 billion frozen assets have already been undone. Have been done. Then the third part is with respect to the nuclear weapons thing. Now, this was the one of the major reason why US and Israel had launched an attack on Iran. Apart from the fact that they wanted to have a regime change, they also wanted to destroy the proxies that Iran had cultivated in different areas, including in Lebanon and in Yemen and in Gaza, right? So here, Iran has agreed not to develop or acquire nuclear weapons, which was essentially its position in 2015 under the JCPOA, right? So Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action also said that Iran will not develop or acquire nuclear weapons. Apart from that, both sides have agreed to deal with the enriched uranium. Tehran already has, through a mutually agreed upon mechanism under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So what it means is that earlier, Iran had to send its enriched uranium to some third country, but now it will destroy its uranium and then it will be sending it to something country. Then finally, there is a 60-day negotiation window under which a final agreement is to be negotiated, and it is going to be extendable by mutual consent. And most importantly, it is also going to be monitored by UN, and it will be backed by UN. The idea behind this is because Iran does not want this to be left to the US goodwill, because maybe next time, maybe if US decides to change its policy in the near term, or some other president comes and he's not satisfied with the treaty or the agreement, then what should be the alternative for Iran? And because of that, this final deal will have to be endorsed by a binding UN Security Council, right? And the idea is to make sure that the deal will not be automatically or unilaterally be violated by US, right? So these are some of the major agreements or the major pointers of the agreement. Okay. Now here, from the exam perspective, we also should understand how this deal impacts India, and actually we do not need to know whether who has won or who has lost in this particular agreement. But as per Henry Kissinger, in a guerrilla war, if you are not able to defeat the gorilla, then the gorilla wins, right? So in a way, A lot of scholars have been saying that the actual winner of this war is Iran, clearly because it has not been able to defeat Iran, right? But the fact of the matter is this has led to a win-win situation for everyone. Now, UPSC asked a question on this particular kind of situation in 2018 and its impact on India's interest. So, in what ways would the ongoing US Iran nuclear pact controversy affect the national interest of India, and how should India respond to this situation? Right? So, again, we have to understand it from the perspective of India's vital national interest in the region, including the energy security, including the sea lines of communication, and then the protection of diaspora remittances, etc. And here, how should India respond to this? We should play a more larger role here, and perhaps we should also ensure that India should not merely be a bystander, right? So India should cultivate, or India already has a look west policy where it cultivates good ties with all the important players, but at the same time it needs to play a more active role, just like what Pakistan has done recently. Anyway, let's talk about the second news, and this news is about a recent meeting undertaken under in Niti Aayog, right? Governing Council meeting happened recently, under which the Prime Minister of India had appealed that we should have a district domestic project estimates, right? Under which this will be very easy for us to understand the kind of economic measures that is to be taken, all these and it will be very helpful for the evidence-based policy making, right? So what exactly is district domestic product? It represents the total value of all the goods and services produced within the geographical boundaries of district over a specific time frame. Exactly what we know about GDP, but instead of a country, here we are looking at a district, okay? Now in this, we will understand what exactly are the various ways to estimate DDP, right? We have the district domestic product. So how do we measure it? Because the traditional way of measuring the GDP, that is the product method, income method, will not be applicable here, for the simple reason because the districts are very much intertwined, and it is very difficult to figure out from the entire whether value is coming from one district or not. So again, for this we need a different framework for estimation. So what exactly are the methodology? So we have two methods, two approaches. One is income originating and the second one is income accrual. So under the income originating, we are measuring, it corresponds to income that originates with respect to the factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, located within a district. So if a district is located in somewhere, right, and whatever income is generated within that particular district, that is measured as per income generating method. The second one is income accruing, measures the income received by the normal resident of a district. So a person can be from district A but who goes to district B for his employment, right? For example, a person could be in New Delhi but he goes to Gurgaon for job. Now how will that income be counted? Now this is the income accrual method, where the income, so this is an income received by the normal residents of a district, will be counted, including the this income originated outside the region, right? So this is primarily about the income method, and this is about the entire income with respect to the factors of production within that particular district. Apart from that, there are two other approaches or three other approaches: top down and bottom up, and then there's a mixed approach. So this is the estimation approach. So what we do is in the top-down approach, the entire GSDP of a state is calculated, and then it is distributed to different districts using suitable indicators. For example, in one state, if there are say 5 districts, and we know that the economic contribution of one district is say 40%. So 40% of that component will go to that particular district, and then using similar method, other kind of attribution will be made. So that is the top-down method. Again, the reverse of this is bottom-up, where what we do is, instead of calculating state-level GSDP, the calculation is done at the district level, which is what we had discussed here, whether it is through the income originating method or through income accruing method. and then it is further added, and then a state level GSDP is calculated. Finally, there's a mixed approach which combines top-down and bottom-up methods, because there are certain companies or there are certain informal industry which requires to be calculated like this, right? So basically, these are the approaches that we are currently following as far as district domestic product is concerned. Finally, what exactly is the requirement for district domestic product? Why it is being held as so much important? Now, the importance here lies in couple of reasons. One is that once we have an estimation of the exact amount of economic activities happening in a particular district, it will allow us for better evidence-based policy making. Also, it will identify the disparities which is present within a particular state. So in Mumbai, Maharashtra, for example, you have several districts like Mumbai, Thane, Pune. They are very well off and they contribute around 40% to the GST, or almost half of the Maharashtra's output. But there are also districts like Vidarbha, right, which is facing a lot of crisis. So there is a lot of problems here, and we need to identify which districts is not actually doing well. And perhaps we need specialized programs like aspirational district program. Then it will provide for us a targeted planning approach, allows program tailored to local bottlenecks and opportunity. Example, boosting agro processing in high agricultural districts like Chandoli in UP. So here black rice was grown, right? And that was grown for the export purpose, only because we were able to identify that this is a district which requires certain additional input, additional intervention, right? Thirdly, it will provide us to a way to capture the informal economy, because when we do a top-down approach, right, the top-down approach, it underestimates the informal association, informal corporation, and especially underestimates the unincorporated manufacturing added by 57% to 148%, right? So this will also help us in taxation purpose, in providing social security, in terms of, or also for the betterment of the employees, all these things. Fourthly, it will provide for effective fiscal devolution, because it can enable targeted fiscal transfer by finance commission and states with measurable local impact. And finally, it will provide or it will be more responsive to local shocks. For example, the DDP data captures district level impacts of droughts, factory closures, enabling timely and targeted policy responses. Because within a state, there can be multiple districts, especially in Bihar. There are several districts which are flood prone district, right? So in those districts, timely intervention is required. And for that, if we are capturing the district level or district domestic product, then that can be a very effective venue for providing such timely intervention. So these are some of the important benefits of capturing the district domestic product. So again, it will be help us in ensuring that there is a balanced regional growth. It will help us in inclusive growth. It will help in providing effective fiscal devolution, etc. Right? The next news is about a report released by UNICEF on children's climate risk report. Okay, so this is a very important report under which UNICEF has highlighted that globally 1.1 billion children are exposed to at least 3 overlapping climate hazards. And this, combined with their physical vulnerabilities and gaps in the social services, increases the risk of harm. So very put simply, what it means is that there are two major things that are happening simultaneously. One is there is overlapping climatic hazards. So what are overlapping climate hazards? So there are hazards which occur simultaneously or one after the other, triggering one and another. For example, if there is a sort of drought, so drought will also lead to crops dying out, and because of that, there will be very little soil moisture that will be present, and then if rain happens, then it will also lead to flooding, right? Or if there is coastal flooding, that will lead to problems in terms of fishing or in terms of survival, right? Apart from that, the water availability will also be declining. So the point is that sometimes crisis happens in addition to each other, right? So just like we have intersectionality, like sometimes a person can be both a scheduled caste, as well as person with disabilities. So in a way, that person is facing double burden, right? Similarly, climate change can also bring out multiple vulnerabilities, and that is what is called as overlapping climatic hazard. So you have drought, along with that you have heat wave, along with that you have uh, malnutrition, all these things that are combining their effects together. Additionally, so these are the climatic conditions, and then apart from that, there is also poor uh, social services, or the kind of uh, presence of the physical vulnerabilities such as social security gaps, health, education, etc. These are also not up to the mark, and therefore because of that it leads to problem in the adaptation. And now this report talks about what exactly are the effect of these overlapping climate hazard on various elements or various aspects of the children. So key highlight. So first, it has talked about, it has given certain important data. So first thing is about climate hazard, what exactly is their impact? And the second one is what exactly is the hazard or vulnerability in relation to the social system. So when it comes to the climate hazard, all children worldwide are now exposed to at least one major climate hazard, including coastal floods, riverine floods, droughts, heat waves, extreme heat, wildfire, sand and dust storms, and tropical storms. In fact, 2.3 billion children estimated to live in areas with detectable air pollutants. So these are the the climatic conditions that are creating a lot of havoc on the children. Apart from that, there is vulnerability with respect to various other systems, such as in health. Climate change could cause 28 million additional cases of wasting and 40 million cases of stunting by 2050. Displacement. Between year 2016 to 2023, climate hazards have caused 62.1 million internal child displacement, averaging 21,000 children displaced every single day. Education. In 2024, climate-related disasters disrupted schooling for at least 242 million students across 85 countries and territories. And poverty. Climate change could push 130 million peoples into extreme poverty by 2030, thereby impacting children welfare. So here we can see how climate change is not just about one single variation, or it's not just about linked to one single cause or effect. It has multiple causes, and especially it is creating vulnerabilities across different social systems, including health, education, poverty, and displacement, right? So what should be done to alleviate this? So according to UNICEF, we require three major actions. The first one is with respect to mitigation. So we require reduced emission. And for that, we need to fulfill the international commitments through ambitious emission cuts, phase out fossil fuels, and ensure a just transition to renewable energy. So this is the mitigation measure that is suggested by UNICEF. Apart from that, they have also suggested adaptation measures as well, and particularly with respect to children. So strengthening the child-centered adaptation. So here, by building climate resilient schools, healthcare, food, water, etc., and also the social protection scheme. Then we should also be empowering the children and youth. How? Through meaningful participation of children and young people in climate related decision making, right? So this is the actions that have been proposed by UNICEF. These are all very broad level. We need to find out specific actions that can be taken within these heads. Okay. The next topic is women representation in political process in India. And recently, uh, an NGO, Association for Democratic Reforms, have published a report that have provided a key gap in terms of the policy intent of women reservation and the actual reality, right? So as such, since the passage of the Women Reservation Bill in 2023, that was the Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam, as per or it initiated 106th Constitutional Amendment Act. Assembly polls have been held in 20 states and UTs, and only 10.2% women were fielded by political parties according to ADR. So this is the reality. So on one hand, we are saying that the women representation should be proportionate to their population. And since it has been historically low, that is why this historic amendment was passed to provide at least one third of seats to women in parliament, that is Lok Sabha, and in the state legislative assembly. But if you look at the reality, there is a huge gap. Only 10.2% women were fielded by the political parties. So what exactly are the reasons behind this gap, and what can be done to address it? But before that, why it is desirable for representation of women or reservation of women in the first place? So the reason are very simple. First is that we all know that women constitute around 50% of the population, but their representation is less than 15% in the parliament or in the decision making. So this reduces women-centric policies, okay, because most of the policies, they do not take into account what could be their impact on women, right? So first we need some women perspective, and for that we require women at the highest decision making level. Secondly, there have been very progressive, encouraging reports with respect to the successful implementation of the 73rd and the 74th amendment, where one third or at least one third of the seats have been reserved for women. So the same approach can also be done at the level of the national level as well. And thirdly, if you look at the global level as well, we are far behind women representation. So these are some of the reasons, both substantive and procedural, why women reservation is very important. Then what exactly are the roadblocks? So first is, so before that, let's talk about what exactly the report says. So there's a low representation. Women candidates made up no more than 14% across the states and UTs. So this would basically will help us in giving a context. When you write an introduction, you can use this according to an ADR report. This was the number, so less than 14%. Then you can talk about that in 28% of the constituencies, there was no women candidates at all, right? And just 74 MPs were elected. Only 9% of the MLAs nationwide are women. So these are the numbers that you can use for your introduction or to substantiate your reasons. And then there are notable exceptions where certain parties have fielded 50% women candidates, right? So you can talk about this as well, that there are certain notable examples as well. So this will just serve you to give a context or to give some sort of examples, or can help in introduction as well. Now, what exactly are the bottlenecks? First is financial constraint. For what is the financial constraint? In the 2024 general elections, female candidates with assets under INR 10 million had a win rate of only 1.49%. So remember, the political parties' actual target of participating in election or contesting an election is to win the election. So there's a winnability, desirability of the candidates to actually win the election. And it has been seen that those candidates who have more resources, more income, can attract more voters because they can participate or they can contribute in the party fund. And historically, women have been having less income or property compared to men because of various patriarchal structure, including not having any share in the family properties, etc. So this is one of the major reason why there is little representation of women. Second, there is patriarchal and structural barriers where the party structures are often male oriented, male dominated. There is lack of inner party democracy and societal norms that prioritize caregiving duties over leadership. So it is generally considered that women are good at caregiving, like they can be a good mother or they can be good at caregiving activities. But when it comes to leadership, the role should be given to male. So this is something that is a patriarchal notion that needs to be dismantled. Thirdly, there is other tokenism, proxy representation, biased ticket distribution, safety concerns such as cyberbullying, political intimidation, and gender-based violence during elections. So these are some of the reasons because of which the women representation is subdued in India. At the same time, we also have constitutional provisions such as Article 325 and 326, which guarantee political equality and the right to vote through universal adult franchise, and it prohibits exclusion from the electoral rolls based on the sex. Then you also have the local level quotas which have been passed under 73rd and 74th Amendment that provides that mandates that 1/3 of the seats in, not less than 1/3 of the seats in the PRIs and ULBs should be reserved for women. Apart from that, we can also mention the 106th Amendment Act. Fine. So the reason why this reservation, despite passing the Reservation Act, why uh, this constitutional amendment has not been enacted is because of one specific provision in the constitution, that is Article 334A, which has tied the women reservation with census and delimitation. So what it means very simply is, as long as there is no fresh census and no delimitation, then women reservation will not be applicable. And this is why a lot of political parties have not been giving tickets to the women, and they say that once the delimitation and the census is completed, then they will do that. Okay. So from this, UPSC asked a question in 2024 in prelims. Provisions will come into effect. So this is about 106th Amendment Act. Provision will come into effect from the 18th Lok Sabha. This will be in force for 15 years, which means that there is going to be a sunset clause. So this is correct. Third statement, there are provisions for the reservation of seats for SC women within the quota reserved for the scheduled caste. This is also correct. Only statement that is not correct is one, the provision will come into effect from this, is not correct because it will come from the census and the delimitation, the next census and delimitation. So definitely not in the 18th Lok Sabha. Okay. Anyway, let's start with the last topic, that is smart warehousing system for food grain storage has been launched. It is launched by the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. And interestingly, this system represents the world's largest deployment of AI and IoT based technologies in public sector food grain warehousing. Now, to understand this topic holistically, we have to have some basics of agriculture. We need to know some basics of agriculture, and particularly about the agriculture process. Especially in India, we have rice and wheat that are major food crops. But we all know that these are sown and harvested at a particular time. They are not available all the year, right? So when they are harvested, rice or wheat, they need to be stored somewhere, right? And they are stored within a place called warehouse. Okay, so this is the warehouse where the food grains are stored. Now, what exactly is the need for a warehouse? First, it allows the food to be stored in a safe and secure place and released as and when it is required, because otherwise it will be subjected to inflation or it will be subjected to supply shocks, because we need food year round, right? And we require food to be stored somewhere and released as and when it is required. Secondly, we also require food during the time of crisis, right? And thirdly, food is stored because we also have this policy called minimum support price, under which the government purchases the food grain from the farmers. So these are the reasons why warehouses are there, to basically store the food grain. But there are several challenges when it comes to the warehouse. Now, challenges include the fact that there is very much spoilage of the food grain, because rice or wheat, when it comes into contact with moisture, they develop, they start getting rotting, right? So there's problem of this moisture or spoilage. Then there is problem of the fact that there is also leakages of these food grain, right? It is not very easy to understand where what or who is leaking those products. Is it being sold in the open market, right? Or there is also very little idea about the efficiency in detection of any spoilage, right? So all these things necessitates that we have certain system which is as less immune to corruption as possible, and possibly we have certain system that takes care of all these things. And that is why the term smart has been added. Like, the smart here captures the entire thing, that there will be a system that will ensure that everything will be determined, or most of the things will be determined by technology, right? And not through human intervention. So what exactly are the various components? So here, first, there will be IoT based monitoring of environmental. So Internet of Things will be monitoring various parameters such as the moisture level, such as the temperature under which the food can be spoiled or the grain can be spoiled. And AI based surveillance. AI will be surveilling whether there is fire, smoke, or rodent detection. Then you have AI enabled back counting. So back counting mistake can be there because of mistake, or it can be used for diversion as well. Face recognition systems, object detection, all these things. Then you have advanced gate automation using FASTag and automatic number plate recognition. So this will allow for those geotagged smart locks or vehicles to pass seamlessly, right? So this is the technology that is mentioned. Apart from that, what exactly is the implementation? So implementation across 215 bag-based food grain warehouses of the Central Warehousing Corporation, while the Food Corporation of India is deploying the system in an additional 150 warehouses. So this is basically the Food Corporation of India that is responsible for the deployment. Then what is the significance? Expected to improve the operational efficiency by reducing the turnaround time of the vehicles, strengthening the compliance monitoring, improving manpower productivity, because the manpower can be used in some other productive measures instead of just looking into the fact that something is getting spoiled or not. And it will enable early hazard detection and providing real-time visibility of the warehouse operation. So these are the significance, which is important from the perspective of mains. Now, food grain storage can be either centralized or it can be decentralized. What is centralized? So it is primarily handled by the Food Corporation of India, which procures or buys the grains from directly or via the state government agencies at the minimum support price. Okay, and the price is determined by CACP. Now, there is another decentralized storage which is carried out through rural godowns, primary agricultural credit societies, and on-farm storage by farmer. Interestingly, around 60 to 70% of food grain provided is stored at the household level using various indigenous traditional storage structures. And the reason for this is also very simple, because most of the farmers in India are small and marginal in nature. In fact, 85% of the farmers in India are small and marginal, right? So that is why the household level storage is the most predominant form of storage. Now, what are some of the schemes for the storage infrastructure? Because if we want to improve food security and nutritional security, we need to ensure that we are able to preserve the food grains for a very long time, not just food grain, but also the perishable goods like your fruits and vegetables. So for that, government has undertaken a series of measures, including the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, which supports the deployment of warehouses, cold storage facilities, etc. Then agricultural marketing infrastructure. It provides financial assistance for the construction of warehouses and godowns in the rural areas, particularly for decentralized procurement. Then uh, we also have a world's largest grain storage plan in cooperative sector, which aims to develop storage and other agri infrastructure at the PACS level. Capacity augmentation schemes includes the construction of modernized steel silos, asset monetization of vacant FCI lands to build new godowns, etc. So we have discussed here the reason why smart warehousing is required, right? What are the key significance of the smart warehousing, and what other measures government has taken in this regard? Let's now move to the quick updates. So the first news is here is about First Constitutional Amendment Act. And this is a very important article that was published in a couple of newspapers that talked about the 75 years of the when the First Amendment Act was passed in the Constitution. Okay. And particularly, there are three major changes that were done. First was that it introduced Article 9, or it expanded Article 19 Clause 2. So we all know that Article 19(1)(a) talks about freedom of speech and expression. And within freedom of speech and expression, you have a lot of things, including the right to speak or right to write, to express your opinion or that of other opinion. And the freedom of press is originates from Article 19(1)(a) itself. But because of certain publication like Organizer, Seminar, etc., which were very critical of the government, and especially they were critical of the foreign relations that India was managing, and India, especially they were critical of India's policy in several other domain. In Government of India decided to incorporate certain uh, other words to impose reasonable restrictions. So earlier we did not have these terms like public order and friendly relations with foreign states as some of the limitation on freedom of speech and expression, but that were added under First Amendment. So remember, 19 clause 2 was there or earlier as well, but it was given more teeth, it was given more or amplified through the First Amendment. The second important development happened with respect to reservation or affirmative action. So in the original constitution, there was only till 3 clauses of Article 15. So Article 15 clause 3 essentially talked about state taking certain reservation or certain measures for the upliftment of women and children. It did not talk about any affirmative action for the communities such as scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Therefore, a woman called Champakam Dorai Rajan approached the Supreme Court and she called upon the idea of caste-based reservation. So the Supreme Court decided in favor of Champakam Dorai Rajan not to uh, ensure that the reservation on caste should be provided. The government inserted Article 15 Clause 4. This allowed the state to make special provisions for the advancement of socially and educationally backward classes, giving effect to Article 46 of the Constitution, which mandates the state to take or to give provisions or to advance the interest of the scheduled caste communities. Okay. Then you have the ninth schedule. So this was a very unique constitutional mechanism or sort of a black box that was created by the parliamentarians. Very interesting feature. And it was to protect the land reforms, because land reforms were very important for to be taken in India, because many of the lands essentially they belong to the zamindars, and we wanted to have some sort of land distribution. But because of the right to property that was earlier a fundamental right, this was coming as an obstruction. So what the government did is that it put all the act, so it had a very important way of bypassing the judicial scrutiny by putting the ninth schedule under Article 31A and 31B. Okay. So to protect the land reforms from being challenged or struck down by the courts on the grounds of violating fundamental rights. So in the I.R. Coelho case versus State of Madras 2007, Supreme Court said that now the ninth schedule will also come under judicial review, especially after 1973, right? Because at that point of time, the Keshwanan Bharti case was found. So what I mean to say is that First Amendment Act was very important. Most of the time, when we talk about the mini constitution or the amendment, we think about 42nd Amendment. But First Amendment was also very significant. And these were the reasons why it was very significant. So the second news is about smart seed coating technology, and it was recently developed by ICAR, that is ICAR, Indian Institute of Oilseed Research. And what exactly it is? It utilizes biodegradable biopolymeric materials to form a protective coating around the seeds, and this coating performs a major role or multi-dimensional role in terms of beneficial microorganism. It delivers nutrients, micronutrients, crop protection agent, and plant growth, and promoting compounds directly to the seed-soil interface. What is the significance of this? It promotes rapid germination and enhances root development. It improved tolerance to both biotic and abiotic stresses. So it's a very important development with respect to seed technology, and was done by ICAR, Indian Institute of Oilseed Research, right? So this is what you should remember from prelims perspective. Next topic is about long range and attack cruise missile, and this was developed by, or it is successfully conducted by Defense Research and Development Organization, that is DRDO. So what exactly are some of the features of this LRA, LRLACM? It is an indigenously developed missile as the successor to the Nirbhaya program, and the nodal laboratory which is involved is Aeronautical Development Establishment that is located in Bengaluru. What are the features? It is terrain hugging flight, which means that it is very closer to the terrain, as almost as it is hugging the terrain, using hills and valleys. And the idea is that it wants to avoid radar detection. Its reported range is of 1,000 kilometers. So in a way, all the neighbors, right? So they are under the range. Next is red blood cells. So researchers has discovered a new mechanism in the RBC by which the malaria parasites evade the effects of artemisinin, the world's most widely used anti-malarial drug, right? So here we just need to understand what exactly are some of the important things about RBCs. So its primary function is to transport oxygen from the lungs to the tissues and carbon dioxide back to the lungs. They are the most common type of blood cell, and they contain hemoglobin, an iron-rich protein that binds to oxygen and gives blood the red color. So why it is red is because of the presence of hemoglobin. Next topic is energy transition index, and the World Economic Forum has released an energy transition index which tracks the kind of transition in energy from the non-renewable to the renewable progress across 120 countries. And here India has done reasonably well. India has jumped 2 places above to now rank 70, driven by investment in energy security and affordability. And the global energy transition readiness has declined for the first time in more than a decade amid a surge in geopolitical risk. The top performers were Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. They have retained their top 3 positions. Next is Turquoise Nexus Initiative, and this is a joint initiative by Turkey's presidency of 2026 UNFCCC COP31, which basically means Turkey, and the FAO, that is Food and Agricultural Organization. They have unveiled, or they have talked about this initiative. So what exactly is this initiative all about? So this initiative says that climate change, food security, and other areas like these are looked into very isolated way, right? So the idea is that we should be looking into these developments through an integrated way, and this is the precise objective of this particular objective or this initiative. And here the developing countries will be supported in integrating the food, water, climate. So these things are not separate, but food impacts water or water impacts food, and these impact climate. They should be incorporated into their INDCs and implementation efforts under the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Now it comes under FAO's Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Partnership. So this FAST partnership is important. It's a multi-stakeholder initiative launched at COP27 in Egypt. Okay. Next is about BGP hijacking. So recently we all know that Telegram was banned temporarily till June 2022, right? Till the time the NEET exam is reconducted. And as a response to the paper leak, the government has banned the Telegram app. And the problem with this ban has been that some of the users outside India are also facing problem. And that is why the Telegram founder has claimed that the access to the app was being compromised through the BGP hijacking, that is Border Gateway Protocol. Now we just need to understand what exactly is this protocol. So BGP protocol is the internet's routing system. It tells network across the world how to reach specific IP addresses. So remember, when you go to any page, it has a specific IP address, and there are certain various routes that take you to that particular IP address, right? But the problem is sometimes there's a false kind of hijacking, which means that the streets that takes you to those addresses, they can be compromised. And this is what happens it's a technique in which internet traffic is misdirected by falsely advertising the route to a website or online service. And it is also referred to by different names such as prefix hijacking, route hijacking, or IP hijacking, right? Next news is about excise conquest. So we know about conquest. So this is a conquest, and India will participate in the 23rd edition of conquest exercise to be held at Five Hills Training Area, Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. So what we need to know is that where it is being happening, right? It is happening at Mongolia, right? And initially it started as a bilateral exercise between US and Mongolian Defense Forces in 2003, right? But now India is also participating. So in a way, if you look at the map of Mongolia, you'll see that it is a neighbor of China. So if China is entering into India's domain, right, especially in South Asian region and also in the Indian Ocean region, so India also tries to maintain its presence in China's neighbor as well. And excise conquest is one of the ways through which India does it. Okay. Uh, so it is co-sponsored by US Indo-Pacific Command, which is now known as the Pacific Command. So I have made a detailed video on this. If you can go and watch it as well, and hosted by Mongolian Armed Forces. The significance of this. What is the aim? To enhance interoperability and cooperation among participating militaries in peace support operations under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. Okay. Next news is about hunger spots report. So this report was jointly published by Food and Agricultural Organization and World Food Programme. It is released twice a year through the Global Network Against Food Crisis. So first thing that we need to know is which organization publishes this. Second, what is the frequency and what are the key highlights. 266 million people are already facing high levels of acute food insecurity. Funding for food assistance has fallen by around 60% since 2022, with the time when Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Most affected countries with respect to the food crisis are largely the sub-Saharan countries, sub-Saharan African countries, Sudan, South Sudan, also Yemen and Palestine, which have faced a lot of war and crisis as the world's most critical hunger hotspots out of the total 13 hotspots identified. The last news is about micro-sovereign funding. So micro-sovereign funding is a very new idea or very interesting idea, and it is very different from the traditional funding. So whenever a government wants to get funding, it launches various assets or various instruments such as bonds, etc., right? And treasury bills, bonds, right? All these things. So these they use for debt management, but there are certain limitation of these instruments. So particularly, it leads to concentrated investor basis, which means that there will be some investor that will hold a lot of your debt instrument. So that can be a very much challenging thing for you. Secondly, the borrowing cost can be very high with no competitive pressure, because if there are very few people who are lending to you, then there will be very limited kind of pressure for them to release or give you lesser interest. Then IMF projects that global debt will reach 100% of gross domestic product by 2029, a level not seen since the Second World War. And because of that, the debt servicing obligation will also rise. And because of that, the countries, instead of spending on essential social services such as health, education, infrastructure, will only be using its finances, or mostly will be using its finances for managing its debt obligation. So in a way, it leads to a very vicious cycle. So what is the alternative? The alternative is micro sovereign funding. So micro, as the name suggests, it means that there will be use of blockchain based tokenized bonds that allow governments to sell public debt directly to retail investors. So instead of selling it to very high net individuals or very institutional investor, the bonds will be sold directly to the retail investor, to the small time investor, small savers, and the diaspora, right? And the idea is, by lowering the minimum investment threshold as little as $30, it breaks the traditional institutional only barrier to provide cost effective capital. So the idea is that it will provide cost effective capital. It can also make sure that the retail investor can participate, and finally it will be ensuring that the debt obligation of the government can also be minimized. So this is the idea behind the micro sovereign funding. So with this, we have concluded the news today for 17 June. I hope this was useful to you. Make sure that you also attempt the questions that would be popping up on your screen. Thank you and all the best.